There's a Dutch company worth more than Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Saudi Aramco combined. $7.9 trillion. And here's the crazy part. Most people have never heard of it. This company created the world's first corporation, the first stock exchange, and the first IPO. It had its own army, its own navy, and could sign treaties, wage wars, and govern entire territories. For 200 years, it was more powerful than most countries. Today, I am going to show you how the Dutch East India Company became the most valuable corporation in history, and why its story explains everything about modern capitalism. Let's go back to 1602. The Netherlands is locked in a brutal war for independence from Spain, and Spain just did something that terrified the Dutch. They merged with Portugal in a personal union. Suddenly, Spain controls Portugal's entire overseas empire. The Dutch are facing a superpower that dominates trade routes across Asia, Africa, and the Americas. They can't match Spain's military power, so they build something else instead, a weapon made of private capital. In March 1602, 7 competing Dutch trading companies merge into one entity, the Verenigd Oostindische Company, or as we call it, the Dutch East India Company, the VOC. On the surface, it looks like a merchant company, but underneath, it's something revolutionary. The VOC has armed ships, private armies, and forts across the world. But the most radical part isn't the weapons, it's the structure. For the first time in history, ordinary citizens can buy shares and profit from empire building. No monarch required, no taxes needed, just capital multiplying through markets. But here's what most people miss. The VOC didn't succeed alone. Behind it stood one of Europe's most fascinating dynasties, the House of Orange. The House of Orange held no kingdoms. They had a weak title and a fragile position in a republic run by merchants. They were squeezed from both sides. Amsterdam's elites wanted more republican control. Spain wanted them extinguished. They had no land to tax, no silver mines to exploit. So they made a choice that changed everything: rule through capital, not through crowns. The House of Orange didn't run the VOC, but they bankrolled it. Decades later, William IV and William V, descendants of the House of Orange, became presidents of both the VOC and the Dutch West India Company. Without crowns, but backed by dividends, they became some of the most powerful men in Europe. At its peak, the VOC was worth $7.9 trillion in today's money. Nvidia, the most valuable company today, is worth half that. Between the early 1600s and mid-1700s, over 1 million people left the Netherlands for Asia. They weren't explorers. They were employees of a mega-corporation. Sailors, clerks, soldiers, craftsmen, all working for the VOC, building trade empires across Ceylon, Java, and Bengal. The VOC stood on 3 pillars: a powerful state charter, Amsterdam's financial elite, and the strategic backing of the House of Orange. The charter wasn't just a trade license. It was closer to a royal mandate. The VOC could sign international treaties, raise armies, capture territories, and govern entire colonies. With nearly 150 merchant ships, 50,000 employees, and a private army of 10,000 soldiers, the VOC didn't operate like a business. It moved like a sovereign power with a profit motive. In 1619, they captured Jakarta and renamed it Batavia. For 300 years, it stood as the company's command hub. This is why you still see Dutch influence in Indonesia today. But this scale needed serious money. In August 1602, the VOC opened its doors to the public. For the first time in human history, ordinary citizens could buy shares in a global enterprise. The world's first IPO. Capital flooded in. But this raised a question. What kind of power could make competing wealthy families work together? The answer led back to the House of Orange. They backed this transformation because they depended on it. Feudalism offered no solution. They had no serfs, no silver mines, no divine right. But they had a winning idea: create an entirely new power base through financial institutions. That made risk predictable. At the core were permanent shares. For the first time, ownership could be transferred freely. This gave birth to the Amsterdam Stock Exchange. Traders went further. They weren't just buying shares. They were betting on future values. They created speculation, arbitrage, hedging. All the tools Wall Street uses today were invented in Amsterdam in the 1600s. From an index value of 100 in 1602, the OC shares rose to roughly 1,000 by the 1720s, a tenfold increase. This was history's first major case of FOMO. But building a global empire on public money came with risk. What if ships sank? What if trade routes collapsed? The Dutch answered with a legal breakthrough: limited liability. If a ship sank, investors only lost what they put in. Their personal property stayed safe. Suddenly, people were far more confident investing. It's a concept we still use today to separate personal assets from business liabilities. The VOC also printed actual share certificates that were stamped, signed, and traded freely. For the first time ever, ownership could flow from hand to hand without royal permission. Dutch financial influence didn't stay in the Netherlands. It crossed borders, reshaping Britain and America. In 1688, William of Orange took the English throne. During his reign, England launched the Bank of England, created public credit, and introduced government bonds. These were Dutch innovations now written into British law. But the story goes even further. In 1609, a VOC ship reached the harbor we now call New York City. In 1624, the Dutch West India Company founded New Amsterdam at the southern tip of Manhattan. In 1664, the British took over and renamed it New York, but they kept the Dutch structure, the legal systems, the financial habits, because they worked. Over time, New York absorbed the tools that once made Amsterdam thrive. By the late 1700s, cracks began to show. The company that once ruled the seas began to sink under its own weight. Corruption crept in. Internal divisions deepened. Military costs rose. Competition from Britain and France intensified. By 1795, the Dutch government stepped in and nationalized the company. Founded in 1602, it wound down in 1796. The mighty charter had quietly expired, but the empire's architecture lived on. The VOC's ideas transformed into modern finance, legal structures, and multinational models we still rely on today. Today, the Netherlands is no longer a seafaring empire. It's a financial empire. It ranks among the most competitive economies on earth, with over 4.3 trillion in inward foreign investment. And one family still casts a long shadow: the House of Orange-Nassau. The crown may be ceremonial, but their connections aren't. From defense to energy to corporate governance, they remain deeply tied to Dutch industry. In 1907, Royal Dutch merged with Shell to form Royal Dutch Shell. Once again, a Dutch company would dominate global markets for over a century. When we think of capitalism, we think of the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, J.P. Morgan. But those figures didn't invent the model. They just followed it. Long before them, there was the House of Orange. They engineered a system where war, trade, and finance moved together. The Netherlands may no longer rule the seas, but Dutch capital now moves across borders with more influence than fleets ever could. Which raises a question: if markets now hold the power once reserved for monarchs, who governs the markets? Who holds the crown when the crown is invisible?